A Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder, Chapter 8, Part 2. Coach Watson might have believed that Daniel was having an affair with Ron, and jealousy was a powerful motive for murder. And if Ron had landed the few good punches that Daniel had told her about, the bouncer could have decided to follow Ron and take his revenge. As Hannah melted, measured, and mixed, she thought about the first of their suspects. She had to check out Coach Watson's alibi, and the Lake Eden Regency Romance Club was a good place to start. Coach Watson's sister, Marianne, would be at the meeting, and Hannah could pump her for information. Identifying the second suspect could take a little work. Hannah planned to drive out to Twin Pines tonight and nose around. She'd find out which bouncer had fought with Ron and whether he had an alibi for the time of Ron's murder. It was 7:25 by the time Hannah had finished her early morning work. In addition to Regency Ginger Crisps, she'd also mixed up 2 batches of chocolate chip crunches, 3 batches of pecan chews, and 1 batch of a recipe that Lisa had developed called White Chocolate Supremes. "Hi, Hannah," Lisa called out cheerfully as she breezed through the back door at precisely 7:30. She hung up her parka, tucked her hair inside a paper cap, and headed for the sink to wash her hands. "What do you want me to do first?" Hannah stashed the last bowl of dough in the walk-in cooler and joined Lisa at the sink. "Would you mind putting on the coffee, Lisa? I've got a few phone calls to make. I mixed up a batch of your white chocolate supremes and you can bake them first. We'll try them out on the regulars today and see what your green thumb can do with that African violet on the counter. I don't want to do jail time for houseplant abuse." "No problem. I'll set up the tables and bring you a mug of coffee when it's ready." When Lisa had left, Hannah picked up the phone and punched out Doc Bennett's number, listening to it ring. Doc Bennett. Doc sounded curt, and Hannah glanced at the clock. Perhaps 7:45 was a bit early to call a semi-retired dentist. "Hi, Doc. This is Hannah Swenson, over at the cookie jar." "Hello, Hannah. Still brushing the way I taught you?" "You bet." Hannah was relieved. Doc sounded a lot friendlier now. "Do you have a dental emergency, Hannah?" "No, everything's fine." Hannah hadn't been able to come up with a roundabout way to ask her question, so she just blurted it out. "I was wondering whether you saw Ron Lascelles yesterday morning as a patient." "My office wasn't open, Hannah. I took the day off and drove up to Little Falls to see my sister. You'd better check with Norman Rhodes. I hear he's been coming in at the crack of dawn most mornings and taking walk-ins without appointments." "Thanks, Doc. I'll do that. And drop in for a cookie one of these days." Hannah hung up the phone and sighed. Things never worked out the way she wanted. Now she'd have to call Norman. The smell of coffee from the shop was enticing, and Hannah walked in to fill a mug. It hadn't finished perking, but it was hot, and she sipped it gratefully. She shouldn't have to call the man her mother had picked out for her without a full load of caffeine to sustain her. "The coffee's not ready yet, Hannah." Lisa turned to give her a curious glance. "That's okay." Hannah took another sip of the coffee-flavored water. Then she thought about Twin Pines and how seldom Lisa got out of the house. "Can you get someone to sit with your father tonight? I'm driving out to Twin Pines and I'll treat you to supper if you want to come along. The neighbors like to sit with Dad now that we bought that big screen TV. Why are you going to the Indian casino?" Hannah remembered Bill's caution about not telling anyone that she was doing legwork for him. "I've never been there and I've always wanted to see the place." "Me too. Herb Beesman says they have great ribs." "Then we'll have the ribs, and we'll take all the quarters in the cash register and feed the slots." So Lisa had been talking to Herb. Hannah stored that away for future reference and walked back to the bakery feeling much better. Lisa was good company, and as far as anyone else was concerned, they were just going out to the casino to eat ribs and gamble. It was time to call Norman. Hannah reached for the phone and punched out his office number. If Norman misinterpreted the reason for her call, Bill would owe her. She twisted the cord around her fingers as it rang several times, and then Norman picked up. Rhodes Dental Clinic. Norman Rhodes speaking. Hi, Norman. It's Hannah Swenson. Hello, Hannah. Norman sounded pleased to hear from her. Did you call your mother yet? My mother? She called me this morning to ask if I'd seen you. She said she'd left a bunch of messages on your answering machine, but you hadn't called her back. Guilty, Hannah admitted. I didn't check my machine until this morning, and then I was in a rush. I don't suppose you happen to know what she'd wanted? Not really. But she did ask what my intentions were toward you. What? Relax, Hannah. My mother's the same way. It must be in the genes. They never stop trying to control your life. Hannah wasn't about to ask Norman what he'd said. She really didn't want to know. I've got a question for you, Norman. Did Ron LaSalle come in to see you yesterday morning? There was a long pause, and then Norman sighed. I'm sorry, Hannah, but I can't tell you that. All information regarding a patient's visit is confidential. Then Ron was your patient? Hannah heard a distinct gulp on the other end of the line. I didn't say that. Of course you didn't. Then why did you assume that he was? Hannah smiled, very pleased with herself. Perhaps she'd actually learned something in that required logic course she'd taken. If Ron wasn't your patient, you could tell me that he wasn't. There's no breach of ethics in that. But you said that you couldn't tell me, and that means that he was. There was another beat of silence, and then Norman chuckled. You're quick, Hannah, and you're right. I guess it can't do any harm to tell you now. Ron was my first appointment of the morning. He came in presenting considerable pain from a fissured molar. A cracked tooth? Yes, in layman's terms. I'm sorry, Hannah. I've got a patient in the chair and I can't talk right now. Just hang on and let me check my schedule. Hannah waited, shifting from foot to foot. This was important. Norman might have been the last person to talk to Ron. Hannah? Norman came back on the line. I'm booked solid this morning, but I don't have anyone scheduled for 1. If you come in then, I'll tell you all about it. You want me to come in? I think it would be best, don't you? We really shouldn't talk about something this sensitive on the phone. I'll pick up salads and sandwiches at the cafe, and we'll have lunch while we talk. I have something very important to ask you. Hannah made a face. The last thing she wanted to do was have lunch with Norman. But if she wanted to help Bill solve Ron's murder, she had to gather all the facts. And the one person left alive who could tell her what had happened during Ron's dental appointment was the dentist himself. All right, Norman. Hannah caved in to the inevitable with all the good grace she could muster. I'll see you at 1.